on your question, or if you just want to speak, you actually absolutely have the right to do that. So we're going to try to keep to about 2 minutes. I'm not going to time you guys, but just try to keep that in mind and keep it to 2 minutes, keep it short, ask questions. If there's a little bit of back and forth, that's totally fine. That's totally fine. We'll just do one speaker at a time, be respectful, listen to everyone's words. Try to keep, no personal attacks. This is a project, we're all neighbors, we're all trying to work together here, and just remember that, respectful language is, just be kind. So, there's a couple of us running around. This light is so hard to see it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I should introduce myself. I'm sorry. I'm Team Contact. I'm part of the environmental team that's helping with this project, helping the ConnectGEN team out with some of the logistics here, obviously. So I have cards. You can wave me down. I'll kind of keep my eye open. And those are some speakers who can talk after Eddie does his little introduction here, and then just kind of wave us down. We'll add you to the list. We'll get as many questions, answer this. Yes, ma'am. Say that loud enough?
Yes. Okay. Can you guys all hear me okay?
Yep.
This will be loud. All right, well, I just wanted to start by thanking you all for being here tonight. Our philosophy in community engagement is to have a regular cadence of these meetings, at a certain intervals to keep the engagement fresh, to keep the discussion going, to keep aggregating feedback that you provide. Then we had our first virtual information session in April, which was held virtually because of COVID restrictions. As most of you know, we had our second public meeting, first in-person community meeting in August. Obviously, this is our second. We are planning to have at least one additional community meeting prior to submitting our permit application. So I just wanted to clarify. I know that conditions here are not ideal, but we've struggled to find a venue that can accommodate the number of people we anticipate that within the town and has all sort of the necessary amenities that we need. So I appreciate you braving the cold and coming out here to be a part of this. I think just kind of an important overarching point that I just want to establish is that the design and development of this project is still ongoing. What we're showing in terms of a project layout, of land implicated by the project is still preliminary. It's an iterative process, and at subsequent community meeting, we'll we'll share more information that we don't have today, right? So, just because we're not able to answer a question or provide information today doesn't mean that we won't be able to, as we prepare this project for permitting. I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that going into the discussion. And really, for the purposes of this, presentation, I really just want to kind of provide some updates and let you all know what's ahead of the project. So, I know a lot of folks have noticed that we've had crews out in the field digging holes, right, and kind of question what's that all about. So what that effort entails is it's a field investigation survey related to cultural resources. We call it your Phase 1B survey. Essentially, we identify what are known as high sensitivity areas where there's a higher likelihood of potentially finding artifacts and other cultural resources. And then we determine where those might intersect with areas of disturbance. So areas where we might be grading, put in an access road, or we might be trenching, put in an underground collection line. We identify sort of the intersection of those areas, and then we have a field team that comes out and does this shovel testing at 50-foot intervals. They take the excavated soil, screen it for artifacts, which are then bagged and sent to a lab for processing and analysis. Ultimately, all of those survey results will be aggregated and provided to the OPRHP or the SHPO. And if archaeological sites are identified, there will be recommendations made on eligibility or ineligibility listing in the National Register of Historic Places. And so, I guess that's sort of a quick synopsis of what that process entails. We're probably, I would say, I don't have an update as of today, but 60–70% complete with that effort. It'll continue into early December. Hopefully the ground isn't too hard for us to complete that this season. Another critical component of our environmental field investigations are wetland delineations. We've completed delineations on all but about 50 acres of target project land. Once those are completed, we'll engage in consultation with the Army Corps of Engineers and DEC, conduct site visits, and then seek essentially a jurisdictional determination with regard to the wetlands that we delineated in that process. We're also in the middle of our conducting what's referred to as a visual impact analysis, which I'm sure you read about on our presentation boards. As part of that process, we've solicited feedback from municipal officials with regard to aesthetic resources in the project area and within a 2-mile radius of the project area. Because that radius implicates several municipalities, we've consulted with officials from Glen, from Root, from Mohawk, from Charleston, from Fultonville, from Fonda, and we're completing the last round of that feedback process with county level officials now. The next stages of the visual impact analysis are yet to commence. They'll commence once our engineering design is sufficiently advanced to have concrete information around what visual impacts from the project will look like. That's anticipated to be completed in early 2022, and we should have more information regarding that analysis to share in the next couple of meetings. The key there is really that we're going to identify minimization and mitigation efforts that are very important and meaningful to you all in the community. We've heard your concerns and voices about that. So we look forward to sharing that information with you and giving you an idea of where landscaping will be implemented to protect blue sheds and where other design adjustments or changes will be made to minimize or avoid those impacts. Another important effort that's underway is the historical architecture survey, which is a survey of all properties 50 years or older within that same zone of visual impact, which is the 2-mile radius of the project area, and that's done on the basis of bare earth topography, meaning that vegetation and buildings are not factored into that visibility modeling, and it's really done to determine if those historic architectural resources have positive visibility of the project, to determine any sort of mitigation that would be required as a result of that positive determination of positive visibility. Again, that process will have a field component, or it has a field component that consists of ground reconnaissance, documenting, identifying, evaluating those architectural resources greater than 50 years old, and some additional resources that don't quite fit that box. We're evaluating for NRHP eligibility. Again, a survey report will be finalized, submitted to the SHPO, detailing the results and our assessment of any adverse impacts on those historic properties as a result of the project. As part of that, we'll also have for SHPO guidance, we'll provide a map and a spreadsheet of all New York State and NRHP properties, systems, and landmarks that could have a positive visibility of the project within a 5-mile radius. So, we're doing the reconnaissance on those resources within a 2-mile radius of the project, but we're also going to give, sort of an inventory within a 5-mile radius as part of the SHPO consultation. I think those are kind of the major highlights with regard to what we've been doing in the field on the environmental side and sort of on the we lump in visual another important update that I wanted to share today, and it relates to the layout and design of the project. You know, we listened to the feedback that we've received over the course of the last 6 months. There's a lot of concern about visual impacts, you know, and the placement of above-ground facilities immediately adjacent to the hamlet Glen historical district there. We've removed panels from the parcel that is adjacent to the cemetery. You can see on our layout map that we provided, you know, what was showing as a potential area for hosting panels on that parcel at our last meeting has been removed, because we're essentially committing to not putting in solar panels on that particular, it's about an 80-acre parcel that joins the historic district. Another more recent development that, you know, frankly, it's so recent that it hasn't been covered in any local meetings, is that we've offered the town of Glen an escrow agreement to assist with the cost of engaging legal support, technical consultant support during the pre-application process, right? So when the application is submitted, you know, interested local parties and municipalities have access to what are called local agency account funds, you know, which are detailed on one of the boards here. That's $250,000, $1,000 a megawatt that's made available for qualified parties to utilize the cost of engaging in that permitting process, but it doesn't cover pre-application consultation and engagement of consultants and legal support on that side. So we provided the town with an escrow agreement. We'll escrow $10,000 that can be utilized to engage legal and technical support through that pre-application process. Sorry, I'm reading minutes here. Yeah, I think that covers it in terms of my immediate updates that I wanted to share with you tonight. And I think sorry, I'm distracted, but yeah. So we'll move into the question and answer session here. We'll you know, follow the code of conduct that as we've outlined, and we'll get into it. I think as a starting point, I just want to introduce the folks that are sitting up here with me. I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves rather. So we'll start with you and work our way down.
Yeah, good evening, all. My name is Michael Moritz. I'm the manager of solar pre-construction for ConnectGEN. I've been with ConnectGEN for about 2 years. I've been supporting this project since its inception. Hi, everyone. My name is Jim Scotto. I'm permitting counsel for ConnectGEN from the law firm Young Summer in Albany. So I've met a lot of folks tonight at previous meetings. So I think that's Thank you for letting us speak up.
So it's Jim Moscato. He's our permanent counsel from the firm of Young Summer out of Albany. He's representing us through the 94C process.
Good evening, everyone. Derek Bremen, Vice President of Development, ConnectGEN. Been with the company a little over a year and a half and oversee our development efforts here in New York and elsewhere in the Eastern United States.
And Randy Patterson, I'm an Environmental Affairs Manager at ConnectGEN. I've been with ConnectGEN also about 2 years, and happy to see some familiar faces from the previous meeting, and excited to hear from you all. Thank you.
And before we jump into questions, I did have two more comments I wanted to make. First of all, I wanted to thank a number of you that have given us actionable feedback. That's really the point of this engagement, is to, from our end, to take feedback from you that actually can be implemented into the development and design of the project to make it more palatable and work better for the community. And in prior meetings and tonight, we've received good feedback. As you can see, we we've taken action on some of it, and we'll continue to do so as we move forward. The other thing I wanted to clarify, I think there might have been maybe some confusion around a water well survey that we distributed to landowners who reside within a 1 mile radius of the project area. Essentially, that survey is really just designed to, as part of the 94C, application requirement, we need to identify any, it's not groundwater, but drinking water, any water supply. Yeah. Any private water supply, sorry, I'm blanking on that. Any private water supply, in order to make sure that we're setting back from it when we're engaging in construction and not, and avoiding any kind of adverse impacts from things like pile driving and construction activities. So just wanted to kind of clarify, if you received one of the surveys and it was, not entirely clear what the purpose was, wanted to provide that little bit of information at the request of one of the attendees tonight. So, we can get started here.
Before you dive in, so this is not an end all be all. I was going to say, Aaron, Decker, and I are walking around with these. So this is anything you want to, add on. When we run out, we'll keep like everything we do. And this will all kind of keep us moving along and be able to our time. Just wave at me or Aaron.
Yeah, thank you. So the first spread breaks. Let's see where
I live on Walltown Road. I'm going to be kind of going to go around me. So the question is, I have several, but the one I'll start with is, how are you going to connect all these different plots and get them to your power?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I mean, the plan right now is we're going to connect all of the distorted solar arrays with underground medium voltage collection lines that we secure either easements or leases for that purpose.
So you got to go through a lot of other people's properties.
We do have to go through. We have to go through the properties. There are folks who are not going to have solar panels on their land who would have collection lines running through their land. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, and those people we've either negotiated or in the process of negotiating agreements with. They're participating voluntarily.
Next question is there any stray voltage or runoff sets from all these panels that are going to be there, and all the water that's going to be coming off them? Are they, is that going to contain anything that's going to be seeping in the ground all around it?
Sure. I mean, maybe you can answer the question about voltage.
Yeah, so as the project gets built and the panels get wired together and wired to the inverters, they'll ultimately send the energy to the point of interconnection. All of those components, every time a new circuit of panels is installed, it gets tested for continuity and that it's operating at the voltage that it's supposed to be operating at, right? So there's not any anticipation of stray voltage that could negatively impact other circuits or have any impacts to the the community around, right, like EMF wise. And then to answer the water question, solar panels are held to international standards for toxicity, which all the products that you use in your daily life are held to these internationally accepted standards. So I can't necessarily tell you that they are entirely free of any amount of toxic material, but they have no more toxic material than the items that you interact with on a daily basis, like any of this stuff, right? Additionally, there's nothing on the module itself that is at risk of running off during a rain event that could get into the groundwater. So the modules are, when they arrive on site, they're free of any surface elements that could be removed in a rainstorm.
Say what happens when one gets damaged?
When one gets damaged. So there's nothing in the module that can necessarily escape, right? It's solids, glass, aluminum, copper, silicon. solder, that sort of thing. So there's no anticipation of any leakage, right? I think the word leakage is the wrong word to think about when modules break. The real impact is on the generation of the plant, and we're monitoring every string of panels. And if we have an issue with one, we're going to know about it. If we have an issue with one panel, we'll know about it. And we make a decision every time we see that, whether or not we need to replace it then and there, or on a cyclical period of every couple of months we replace all the panels. However, 5, 10 if there's a few. But we have panels on site where we can replace them as they get damaged.
So what kind of experience do you guys have working in the Northeast to install all these things?
So ConnectGEN is not going to be boots on the ground building a project. We hire a contractor that works in the Northeast. And we work with the IBEW and the LAMA unions to source in-state labor as it's available in the region, right? And those contractors are going to be building the project.
So,
The other thing I would add to that is that we have a project in Rockland County that's actually applied for, submitted an application under 90% for a permit. Their Southeast Solar project. It will be constructed as things are planned right now before this project. So by the time we're moving to break ground on this project, we will have constructed a 270 megawatt project in the state of New York.
the last statement I got is, I understand the plight of the farmer. I lost the dairy farm myself. And all I gotta say is that it's this situation that they're in that's creating this community issue that we have. And I'm pretty sure pretty soon we'll be worried more about food security than we will about thank you.
Okay, thank you for your questions and your comments. Next, I have Steve.
I'm here. Yeah. How you guys doing tonight?
Good, how are you?
Good, good. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. So obviously, if you're, and I had this written out, but I lost it, so I'm reading it off the phone. So please be with me, or bear with me if I have to look real close. But oh, sorry, I'll get that. So if you're successful in pursuing your proposal through ORES and the rest of the regulatory framework that exists beyond NYSERDA's award to ConnectGEN, your continued financial success would be important, obviously, to the town of Glen. Because if the company were to fail, the decommissioning and revitalization would likely fall on the municipality with whatever funds have accumulated in the decommissioning fund. It might even require hiring contract staff to manage the removal, a cost that the original developer might not have placed as a part of their decommissioning plan. And generally, you find that when companies fail to thrive, they often cut non-essential maintenance and sometimes essential maintenance. But in the case of an industrial site, that would often include landscaping, the replacement of trees and shrubs that also fail to thrive, as well as roads, safety signage, training, etc. If ConnectGEN becomes our new multi-generational neighbor, ConnectGEN's continued viability, because they lease so many hundreds of acres of the town, becomes a significant concern. In 2020, NYSERDA awarded ConnectGEN a 20-year contract to purchase renewable energy credits from them. It's my understanding that ConnectGEN has bid an index renewable energy credit strike price. I've tried to get my head around this a little bit, so I'm asking you to fill us in a little bit on this. Can you tell us about the index REC strike price that ConnectGEN bid and how that's used to determine what ConnectGEN would receive for its Glen-based production? Or is it only the renewable energy credit itself that you're getting paid for from NYSERDA and you're selling the energy elsewhere? And I have a couple follow-ups, but.
Yeah, so the index renewable energy credit construct is basically 3 avenues of revenue. So one is the energy, one is the renewable energy credit, and then there's a third payment, which is capacity, which is the availability to provide power onto the transmission system. So we have a price with NYSERDA that they will pay us for each megawatt hour that's produced from the project for all three of those revenue streams or products.
Okay. So so that price that you bid and that they awarded you on, that is the price you'll be getting for megawatt out for each megawatt hours?
That's correct.
So okay, I didn't understand that, because when they actually talk about that in the PSC ruling, they actually say that there's a monthly REC that would actually be applied.
So
Yeah, so there's a monthly settlement mechanism. So NYSERDA pays us the strike price on a per megawatt basis.
Okay.
So that's fixed. So no matter if the price of electricity, a rack, and capacity is $100 on the open market, NYSERDA is only going to pay us our strike price, whether it's above or below that.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's what we receive. And then we'll actually, on the open market, we'll sell the power and the capacity. And so those are floating based on market mechanisms. And so at the end of a month, there'll be a true up. So we receive the price times the megawatt hours that we produce. And then if the power that and capacity we sell in the open market and rec is above that, then NYSERDA will pay us a levelized rec value. Or if it's below that, then we actually owe NYSERDA. So it's kind of a settlement process, because there's an open market where that price fluctuates, which needs to be settled against what the fixed price NYSERDA is paying us.
Okay, so I'm going to, I'll try to restate to test my understanding. And so basically, it could fluctuate. You may owe NYSERDA some, they may owe you every month, but at the end of the day, on a level that that strike price, I think it's about $44 and some, is what you would expect to get per megawatt hour, every month going forward. So, and my understanding is that the annual expected production is about 500,000 megawatt hours. That was what was in the bid. I think it's like 497 something. Yeah, and that you can't go over 600,000. In case we had a fully sunny summer, I'm assuming that there was a maximum there, and that means.
It's like 120%.
Okay, yeah, that would be about right then. Yep. So, so based on your estimate, really, what kind of revenue, based on that, would, and I can do the math, but I'll give you guys the opportunity to answer. Do you expect to actually be taking in through the NYSERDA mechanism here in the town for the Glen-based production?
I think it's around $22 million gross revenue, somewhere around there.
Okay.
Per year,
Per year, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
per year.
okay. Thanks.
Gross revenue,
Gross revenue, yeah, yeah.
not accounting for any costs.
Gotcha, yeah,
The
no,
$300+ million project.
yeah, yeah.
That's your cost is $300 million to create.
It's around.
Estimated,
Yeah.
300.
Okay, that's good, because that was my question.
Thanks, guys.
Oh, she wrote it down. Sorry, I didn't go back. So her questions are, what percentage of construction material will be left in the ground during decommissioning, e.g. these were the 3 to 4 feet? So really, that could be a pretty straightforward answer. The only materials that are installed deeper than that are piles, the steel piles on which the racks and panels are mounted, and generally those are going to be pulled out where they can, but in some instances, there may be a refusal and an inability to pull them out, and they would typically be cut at that depth and left in the ground under that. But to my understanding, Michael, do you have any other?
Yeah, that's not anticipated really. That's like a once in a many thousand miles kind of chance that we experience that. Because the clouds go in, they can like come out.
Okay, yeah, she's not here. All right, I'm waiting for her to say something.
Follow up.
Yeah.
Okay. follow-up question is, will there be any wires touching the ground?
No, those would be removed. How deep were they there?
Depends on. These are all So well, the collection is varied at different depths across the project based on what the property is used for. So for approved cultivated ag fields, the required vary underground collection of 48 inches below top level. For other non-actively cultivated fields, it doesn't have to be that deep. And so there's different depths anticipated for the collection. Fair question. Something we consider. Well, two is the location that the lines are marked and labeled and mapped. So if that would ever happen, everyone up there would know what they were and they can by that.
You're talking pylons, maybe less in the ground because of the way they're installed, difficulty in getting out. But wire that's only 48 inches under the ground won't be removed. Leftover trash from cotton and you're done.
Maybe I see it that low depth where it don't have any impact on activity, so there's no particularly impact.
It's not going to be agricultural when we put our solar panels in. So let's think about the future. We've got garbage piling up all over the world. We don't need it here as well. So when you're gone, it shouldn't be that you're going to take everything with you.
Well, there's no anticipated impact like wires and ground.
Have you ever done the basement and run into stuff that you there?
I mean, that's my point, right? They're all having multiple survey, they're gonna know that that line exists, whether or not it's an actually line starting to the full button or not. And everything, live event is massive survey, So if the crop 50 years from now, 30 years from now, the product's gone, pull up all the files, remove the racks, modules, and substation, and we just need some lines around, right? And if the property sells and wants a big basement, they're gonna have to do a survey, and that's gonna be, it's not gonna be a
I don't
problem.
understand why you wouldn't pull the line. Why wouldn't you pull it?
It would require re-trenching and reopening a trench and picking it all back up and filling it back in. It's something we can consider. I mean, it's not necessarily out of the question. It's not necessarily always a requirement, so it's not always our decision.
It's also worth mentioning that we have contractual obligations to landowners that differ from regulatory obligations. And so in some instances, you know, we may be required to do that even though regulations don't require it.
Regulations do not require you to remove everything once the process is over.
Okay, so the next question from Priscilla is, what are the decibels expected for inverters and transformers? So I would ask Ryan to answer that if he's still here. Yeah, Ryan, who's with Epsilon Associates, our noise, sound.
Yeah, props.
So you anticipate, the question was anticipated decibels
From inverters and then transformers.
sure, so the inverters themselves, the big metal boxes that can be found in sort of amongst the arrays. A typical inverter is around 65 decibels at a distance of 30 to 40 feet. There are different sound levels produced by different inverter manufacturers, so when that is selected, we would be modeling that to predict the exact sound level to make sure that they do achieve peak requirements. So 65 decibels is about the sound level of a typical conversation between two people, not like how I'm talking now, because I'm not just talking to one person, so I'm trying to project a little bit. So I'm being louder than what the inverter would be by shouting or raising my voice.
I think it's important to note, though, help to amongst the entire project area are less about the decibel of particular equipment, but more about the sound of at residences participating in on-board state.
That's true. The state of New York has very robust set of some property values, predict show how projects going to do. 30 or 40 feet away from an inverter, unless you were inside of the project area, directly maximum units. So the levels off of the outside of the project site are generating 30s and 40s at the worst case scenario, right up against the project itself.
Did you answer the same question with regards to the transformers?
Yeah, so there are small transformers which are also associated with the project. Those are substantially quieter than the inverters, depending on their size. The one exception would be the substation transformer, which is a larger unit, so that would be the single loudest component of the entire facility. The substation has specific sound level limits that are even more restrictive than the rest of the project as well, that we need to adhere to.
I think there's a follow-up question.
Yeah, just a follow-up. What about 80 acres of panels during a nice summer night rainstorm? How loud is that?
You mean that, like, with the rain hitting them?
Yeah, well, if you were outside in a rainstorm, the sound of rain hitting near you would be louder than, things hitting close by would be louder than what you hear in the pan, unless you're standing inside the project. Again, if you're inside the project boundary, standing right next to the panel where you wouldn't be able to distance, then you'd be able to hear that.
Thank you. I shuffled. I put you back in, Fred. Susan.
You answered one of my questions. This is important because we're very concerned, we have a lot of high quality farmland, and I appreciate that there's farmers who are eager to lease to you, but how can you make the footprint of ConnectGEN and the 250 megawatts smaller on the town of Glen? What can you do that can make it smaller?
Well, I mean, Michael can add something from a design standpoint. I mean, add something to speak to that from a design standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I think to start, do you specifically mean the town or the?
I just specifically asking, like, if we're looking at 1,400 acres of panels, how could we make it 1,399 or less, right? Like, how could we?
Yeah, how could you reduce the number of acres that you would need to produce this energy that you are considering?
I mean, the short answer would be to redesign the facility in a less optimal way, right? You would increase your ground coverage ratio and, put the panels closer together than is optimal, right? Because then you're using less land to achieve that generation.
But the issue with that approach is that you generate less energy.
Right.
So the closer the panels get to each other, the more likely they are to shade subsequent rows of them in morning and evening hours. So it's going to reduce the amount of energy that we can produce. And we've made commitments to the state of New York as part of their larger scale commitment to renewable energy that we need to be in order to stay exalted with them. So yeah, it's very difficult to take the constraints that the project has contractually now and make a smaller project. Ultimately, we would be relying on a future technology that doesn't exist yet.
All right, that was my next question, is, you know, do you see a technology, I mean, I see the completion date is 2024, or hopefully 2024, do you see any of that technology on the horizon that you might be able to apply at that time?
So I'll just talk a little bit about technology, I think, because the panels themselves are constantly becoming more efficient, more powerful, in some cases physically larger, and in other cases better protected against the elements, and in even other cases less degrading over time. So there's a lot of facets that panels can improve the technology between now and when you buy panels for this project. Additionally, the equipment that is responsible for rotating the panels with the sun during the day is constantly evolving. They're getting more efficient, more durable. They're requiring less site work to implement. So ultimately, by the time we build this project, the grading that we anticipate for the site will likely go down from what it is now because we'll be using technology that is a little bit better use of the existing topography. I can't tell you how much at this time, but it's just something that we're tracking in the future that's coming. But as far as like the architecture of the project, there's nothing on the horizon that changes from the panel and tracker, you know, that we're planning here. And as a result of that, you know, there's just acres per megawatt and acres per megawatt hour that we're going to be struck to because of physics, and that's just how it's going to have to be to meet our goals.
I understand that for residential installations, that there is a high quality panel that's quite expensive, but is very efficient. It has a temperature range that's it's most efficient at. Would you be considering using those panels for this project?
So we're going to be using the highest quality manufactured and technologically advanced equipment that can be financed, right? So there's a component that we have to think about with risk of people who are giving us the money to build this project. And then other than that, we're going to be on the leading edge of solar technology because it's better for us to do that as well.
And you don't have the name or the model or anything like that at this point of what you might use?
That's correct.
Yeah. Susan, just one other thing to add too, because you asked the question about how to increase, how would you have more land available, reduce land available. One way also would be to reduce setbacks. So if you can utilize, there's, as you know, a lot of constraints that go into the siting of the project. One of them is setbacks, but there's other things, other environmental constraints. But setbacks, if they're not, you know, if you do not have a setback, for example, to a participating landowner, that opens up strips of developable land that you can use. If you have locations where setbacks are less to property boundaries, that again opens up developable land. So those are the types of things you can also do. Open up what's folding in panel locations.
So you'd be using the same number of acres but less parcels.
Right.
All right, well, that's very good information. Thank you.
Shelby?
So I just recently been paying attention to what's been happening and obviously have some concerns as a younger resident of Glen and just the long-term effects of our farmland. And I do have several questions. First being, I see the returns that your company has by being here, by taking the natural resources of the sun to generate renewable energy. But other than the benefits to the farmer for their financial gain, what will your company bring to our community?
So, I mean, there's a number of things, right? So the project is anticipated to generate a substantial amount of tax revenue, or, you know, revenue in the form of payments in lieu of taxes. You know, we're still in the process of you know, figuring out what that's going to amount to. We haven't negotiated any pilot agreements to date, but we estimate, you know, we are holding out that should amount to, you know, at least $30 million over the life of the project. You know, the rates that, you know, we've kind of tossed around in early discussions for a pilot in the town of Glen, for example, would, you know, would amount to the equivalent or greater than the current, you know, entire town tax revenue that's collected. So my understanding is that, you know, and I know John's here, the town of Glen tax, you know, brings in about $400,000 annually. Is that correct, John? That's correct. And you know, we've tossed around, you know, for example, if you look at like the Eden pilot that signed with the town of Glen, it's $1,250 per megawatt. If you were to apply that to a project like Mill Point, I can't do the math that quickly, but you'd be looking at, you know.
What do you mean by a project like Mill Point?
This size.
So the Eden Renewables project is 5 megawatt project, right? So they're paying $1,250 per megawatt as a pilot payment, and that is paid annually over a set period of time. The agreement might be 15 years long. Right? They're paying that in lieu of property taxes, which, you know, if the property taxes were assessed, it might be a different amount. But that, for example, if you were to take that and apply that rate against the 250 megawatt project, you know, that's $350,000, and then, yeah, $300,000+. So, you know, if we were to enter into a pilot for, I think the magic number is like $1,600 per megawatt. You know, we would essentially create a revenue stream in the town of Glen that's equivalent to all of the property taxes collected by the town of Glen. So essentially doubling the tax revenue that comes into the town of Glen.
So the tax revenue that is going to the town of Glen, for this lack of understanding, that is given to the town of Glen to distribute for infrastructure, or how is that distributed?
The town board decides how you tax it. And I will say that I'm only talking about the town of Glen. There's also county and school, right? So we'll also make similar arrangements. Our goal is to make put similar pilot agreements in place with those tax jurisdictions as well, which will add tax revenue to the county and to the school district.
Also going back.
I have more benefits that I could highlight, but if you want me to.
No,
Yeah, so I mean, in addition to that, you know, we've been engaging in sort of supporting local community organizations through sponsorship. So we've sponsored, you know, the Fonda-Fultonville PTSA, the Glen Volunteer Fire Department, the Haven of Hope Farm Stand and Bakery,
Sponsored them in what way?
we've given them monetary donations. It depends on the entity, everything from $500 to $1,500. You know, some of these organizations, I think Aaron with our PR firm knows a little bit more detail, but you know, most of these organizations we've at least made 2 donations to. You know, we've investigated sponsoring the FFA program in the local school district. We were told that could be arranged, but it couldn't be arranged, I think, until construction started or until the project was in operation. So that's something that we're looking to in the future. From the get-go, we've asked for recommendations as to, you know, what organizations, what endeavors, you know, that matter to the local community we can sponsor. There's, you know, benefits like, you know, when we have this meeting and we pay the hay stand leader with this barn out. We rent heaters from local supply companies. Last meeting we had, we spent money on refreshments from the Rustic Red House there, right, in the heart of Glen. So there's that sort of, you know, there's that on the, you know, sort of the early level. It's maybe less significant, but then as we move to construction, right, we're going to source materials, we're going to source labor through, you know, relationships we have with unions, right? So that's going to put money into the local economy as well. You know, those guys that are coming through, they'll eat at you know, local restaurants, they'll, you know, buy stuff at local stores. That's added revenue. There's a residential utility bill credit program that we'll fund, and basically we'll put, is it $500 per megawatt per year, or is it for 10 years, I believe, for 10 years. So we'll basically pay into a fund, a set amount per megawatt. We'll pay it into the local, we'll pay it to, sorry, help me.
Yeah, the utility.
Do we pay to the utility directly?
So the PSC is still trying to decide how to administer this program, so I think it's going to be paid on that.
Well, I guess I'll say, you know, my biggest concern isn't necessarily the financial gain, but the fact that the land that our other farmers and how much people are tending to, and how the impact I mean, I'm not an agricultural person myself, but I mean, 30 years is a long time to be
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question, and one we're also, you know, happy to answer. I was just, you asked about benefits, right? So I was thinking financial benefits first,
I understand,
but yeah. So I mean, agriculture, like solar is really complementary to agriculture in the sense that, you know, you drive piles into the land essentially sits fallow for the entirety of the life of the project, right? So you're not tilling the land, you're not applying chemicals to manage, you know, that you would apply in traditional agriculture. The soil is essentially allowed to sit fallow, and it has essentially a regenerative benefit to the land. So at the end of the project, when everything's removed, it can be returned to agriculture and may in fact be, you know, improved land from the standpoint of agricultural use.
One other thing, you talked about the interaction the sun has with the soil. The presence of the panels doesn't entirely block the sunlight onto the ground. And especially in the case of a project like this, where the intention is to use tracking equipment. So not only is there a permanent separation between panel rows in which the sun could directly interact with the soil, but during the day, as the trackers move, there's always opportunity for sunlight to go underneath the areas that on other parts of the day may be shaded. So throughout the life of a project, there's a very small amount of surface land that is shaded all the time.
And that's one of the reasons we use bifacial panels, which are, you know, panels that are absorbing sunlight, you know, on both sides, right? Because we want to benefit from that albedo where the sun reflects off the ground. Essentially, it hits the backside of the panel. If the sun, you know, we wouldn't be able to realize that advantage if the sun didn't hit the ground and reflect back, right? So, but the other thing that I didn't mention too is that, you know, once the project is built, our plan is to revegetate the areas with native grasses or that type of vegetation, which have deeper root structure than crops like corn and soybeans, which adds to the health, which contributes to the health and integrity of the soil.
30 years, that's the plan after everything's done.
No, that's to be revegetated after construction. So you'll have native grasses and pollinators growing across, you'll have native grasses and vegetation growing across the site over that 30+ life year span. Yes, for safety purposes.
Harvesting that and planting it, or you plant it and then it just dies and how do you get in there with
Well, they're specialized mowers that are essentially designed to mow around racks and panels, right? So that would be one of the ways that we could maintain vegetation. We could potentially graze sheep to maintain vegetation on the project. It'll die because it gets really cold here in the winter and all of the grasses die, but you know, they're perennial and they come back. They don't have to be planted every year. I'm not a scientist, so I should probably let Randy.
And we're also determining native vegetation that aligns well with solar panels, so we wouldn't necessarily plant like a grass that grows to 20 feet high that we have to mow, you know, every other month. We're choosing native vegetation that works well with that 12-foot height generally of panel.
I do have some other questions going back. Originally, you were saying that you guys had been having consultations with officials in town planning, in town. What exactly has been going on in those conversations?
So what I mentioned earlier, where we're sort of consulting with officials outside the town of Glen, that's a specific consultation related to aesthetic resources. You know, because our 2-mile zone of visual impact, you know, it extends beyond the boundaries of Glen, right? And if you draw that 2-mile radius on the project, it includes land in Root, in Charleston, in Mohawk, you know, in the villages of Fultonville and Fonda, right? So we've inquired with officials in those areas for feedback regarding, you know, an inventory of aesthetic resources that we've identified and asked them for, you know, feedback on that. Are we missing something? What additional resources would you add to that list that we should take into consideration as we complete our visual impact analysis?
When you say visual impact analysis, when we're driving down the road, there's going to be trees to hide them. What about those of us us to enjoy the view. I have a beautiful view where I live. Your panels aren't up yet. And I have my friends come and say, what lake is that? I said, that's no lake, that's a solar farm. And all I'm seeing now is one solar farm after another going up. So what happens? How are you going to fix that visual view?
Well, admittedly, there are some view-shed effects that can't be mitigated. I mean, that's.
That we have to take into consideration. Our town is very hilly, and as you're going, all you're going to see it. And it's like all of a sudden there's a field of panels, and you can see it. It's not good. I mean, you say it's going to be beautiful, we're going to plant trees and shrubs, but we live in a very beautiful hilly valley. As we drive, we're going to see it. Or my friend Mickey's taking a beautiful walk, and all you see are the view's going to be destroyed by panels and glass. Reflected. I kind of giggle because I go out on my view at night, and I'm thinking, how many moons am I going to be able to see in those panels?
Well, they're designed actually to absorb light, just to clarify there, right? So they're not mirrored in that sense. So.
But it's very reflective here today.
Yeah, so I think we're going to perform visual simulations based on the design of the project that will capture certain areas within the project area, and we'll have boards that will demonstrate and show now what does a viewscape look like without the panels, what does a viewscape look like with panels, and what does a viewscape look like with certain mitigation strategies of certain vegetation screening, and what that may look like during certain periods over the life of the project. So we'll have that information for you to review and absorb.
I know what it's going to look like because I already see it. But I have a question. You mentioned earlier 1,400 meters. To what point does that stop? I mean, I feel like I've seen in other places where they're doing 2,000 meters, 3,000 meters. What is the limit? Or what is the limit?
Yeah, so I mean, we're limited by really the capacity of the project, right? That we have an interconnection position, 250 megawatts. You can only build so much to generate, that amount of power. It's not really in our best interest to use more and more and more land because that's more and more costly. I think the figures you've seen from us have been, 2,000 acres, which is really more reflective of the total parcel acreage involved. So that if you were to sum up the acreage of all the parcels that with those panels, it would amount to 2,000 acres, and the 1,400 acres is what's within the fence, essentially. So really, I mean, it's capped by the size of the project. I mean, it'd be bad business to use 2,000 acres within the fence when you reduce 1,400 to do the same thing. Does that answer your question?
So I just need to do a quick time check, so it's 7:30, I know it's school night for my family, I don't know about the rest of you, but we'll stay a little later, if you guys wanna stay a little later, just want to my time, we've been pretty generous with time, which is fine, but I just do a little check on how many more people are involved.
No, she's saying we've
We
got.
have a half hour left, so we'll do a time check for everybody.
Just wanna make sure everybody gets
So
there.
if you have questions, please get them in, and if, we'll just try to keep rolling here. Did you have a follow-up question?
About the social project, what's the minimally viable project? If you're looking at 1,300 to 2,000 acres, we model it financially. What can you do to minimize the impact on this community?
So I think there's a little bit of miscommunication on the acreage. These numbers, this 1,400 number is an approximate amount of land within the fenced area for the project that we have modeled with our next survey contract. So there's not like the 2,000 acre number, like I said, it's a parcel acreage. The total buildable acres that we can use based on setbacks, wetlands constraints, and other environmentally sensitive areas, cultural resource areas, that whittles that down. But the preliminary design that we're showing incorporates a configuration that is what we need to build to meet our commitments to the state and to NYSERDA.
But suggesting, so you're using NYSERDA as a proxy for the size of the project. But if this community is able to convince NYSERDA
still make money and do it at a smaller scale?
We have a contractual obligation with NYSERDA to produce a certain number of megawatt hours per year, and so that's our contractual obligation. OREG's, Office of Renewable Energy Society, is a permitting authority that will review the application for completeness, review the technical studies, review the impacts to the community, review the mitigation efforts that we'll undertake in order to minimize those impacts. And then they will make an evaluation as to whether, this project comports with the rules and regulations that they are undertaking to ensure that we're complying with. And so when that process is complete, they will presumably issue a certificate so long as we're complying with those obligations. And as part of that certificate, they may also require us to undertake mitigation efforts in order to minimize impacts that they've identified in their evaluation.
I just wanted to ask another question along this line. When I was at the public in here the last time, I asked the question, do you have any plans to expand if you had the opportunity? And the answer was yes. And now I'm hearing no. So I want to understand why you said yes before and no now.
I get a chance to, if I was the person that said that, I am speaking on, our focus today is on this project, and based on what I was speaking about construction, right, this meeting is about that, and I may have misspoken, right, like I'm not the one planning this project, I'm the one designing, so I can potentially admit fault there, but, and let Eddie expand, but like, today's meeting is about this project.
Eddie answered my question when I asked the last time, not you. And my question was, if you had more people who wanted to lease land, would you make this project bigger? Or would you expand in the future? And the answer is yes, but I'm hearing no now. This project is contained in a certain size, but this doesn't stop the company from looking in the future to put in more solar panels. Am I correct in that statement?
That's correct.
So basically, this is a project, and this is the size of the project, and this is the size for your contract. But there is nothing stopping the company from creating another project in the future.
Yeah, so we're constrained by our interconnection request for 250 megawatts.
I just want to understand.
So there's nothing preventing us,
contradictions of the-
there's
of the
nothing
answer.
preventing us from future projects, that's correct.
I think
No, go ahead.
I think the point that has yet to be made is that this project is moving forward into permitting as a 250 megawatt project. To build anything beyond that would require another permit, right? And so that would be essentially a different project. It is, and what I said at the last meeting was that, I will never say that something is absolutely not, that something would absolutely never happen, right? We live in a world with endless possibilities, and
The reason I ask is I think the community needs to know that this project isn't the end project. There's always for future, and we may come back in the future.
well, I mean, we're one of hundreds of solar development companies out there, and so, I think.
I just
Yeah,
tried to
yeah.
clarify this because, in asking a very specific pointed question
Yes.
than what I did before. And the answers I'm hearing is leading to a different interpretation. And I want the interpretation to be clear, that's all.
I mean, have we clarified, I guess, is the question.
Clarify to me.
Okay, fair enough.
I don't know if anybody else has questions. Clarify.
I've got it back. Michelle, you got snacks in the deck here.
Okay, my number one concern is the sheer scale of the project. That was brought up earlier, depending on people's size. That was my big question. The sheer magnitude of this whole project overtakes the whole agricultural aspect of it. And what other projects have you created of this size in New York State? And what data do you have from large other projects in New York
before, we've got, you know, a more advanced project in Chappaqua County, South Ripley Solar. We've done, you know, all of the work necessary to submit what we think is a complete 94 in the application. I think we're still waiting for the actual completeness determination. Correct me if I'm wrong with this. And so, you know, we've walked through all of the processes that, you know, we are currently walking through, we'll walk through for this project on that project, right? So that gives us a lot of data to inform our approach here. We know, you know, we're getting insights into what, you know, what ORES, you know, wants to see in the application for, you know, where there are gray areas sort of in the regulations, what, you know, what needs to be done to sort of, you know, provide, you know, the utmost clarity and information necessary to sort of eliminate the ambiguities there, I guess you could say. You know, I think another point on that front is our development team, you know, Derek, our CEO, a number of the folks have done a lot of renewable development in the state of New York. You know, not necessarily as, you know, as employees of ConnectGEN, but in past lives, you know, with other companies they've worked for. They've, you know, they've worked with NYSERDA, they've, you know, worked on projects that were contracted to NYSERDA. They've walked projects through, you know, the predecessor process to see Article 10. So there's a lot that can be extracted from that experience that will benefit us here. You know, we are in the process of building, of constructing a solar project. It's not in New York, but it's in Texas. That, you know, I think we're, you know, able to derive some takeaways from that, and that will inform our approach here as well. And then, you know, we're members of industry organizations, right, that consult about the most pressing and you know, urgent and relevant issues related to renewable development in the state of New York. Where, you know, the ACE New York, for example, the Alliance for Clean Energy, and we, you know, we participate in sort of that industry, you know, industry exchange, right? So we can learn from our colleagues and from other folks that are developing projects in New York. And then when we go to select a contractor for this project, we might speak to this, but I mean, I think our goal is going to be to work with someone that has New York experience to the extent we're able to find the right, you know, the right contractor to build this project. So we'll derive that benefit as well. I don't know if anybody on the panel has anything to add.
Is there other projects?
I have another question. Okay, so to me, it seems like this is, I'm hearing a lot about ConnectGEN and watts and megawatts and what you're going to do and trying to, you know, mitigate the views. But it all boils down to the property rights that are about all of us. And it's not just about the landowners. It's about us as residents, it's about the Amish, it's about the people that are farming this land right now that need extra land for expansion. And I don't see ConnectGEN as being a good neighbor to us. I see you guys being around for a couple of years, and what do you have at stake? Nobody's living here along with us. You don't have to look at these views. You don't have to deal with your water being contaminated by water running down the hills. We live in a historical hamlet with 5 scenic byways that were just proposed, which you guys knew about, and it hasn't been changed on your map. So we can look from our historical hamlet, and we can look forward and see the solar down the hill. I'm not seeing where you're going to be a part of our
Cold in here, and I can't blame what they're turning in the background. Okay, yeah. How hard would it have been?
We have a couple requests to bring back on, but we can do whatever.
Turn it off. I don't want to hear.
Our water supply in Glen is very low to begin with. So when you ask us for information on our wells, we don't have water to begin with. And now you're going to risk contaminating it with the runoff from these solar panels. You have no data to go by. Where these have been up for 30 years and somebody's taken them out and planted row of corn.